Hi, Aries, Sun and Rising. Welcome to your June 2022 Astro Update. It's Raina here. So I was just thinking about something and I wanted to share it with you. I thought it was kind of funny. I was looking at my list that I have compiled for transits for June, and I was thinking about Mercury going direct. That was the first thing on my list. That's on June 3rd. But now that I think about it, Mercury goes direct in Taurus. But I was just thinking about, Mercury went retrograde in Gemini, and your chart is the chart of the universal uh, chart because you're the beginning of the astrological new year. So you you mimic the universal chart. And I was thinking about how when these transits happen and they're in their own sign, when Mercury retrograde and it was in Gemini, it was in its own house, the third house. So it's just so interesting how Aries follows all of the transits sometimes like that, and how, what does that mean? Does that mean that Aries are the chosen people or something? In a sense, maybe that is true because you are the first sign. But anyway, Mercury does go direct on the 3rd in your second house. It went retrograde in the 3rd house that it rules, and then it went back into the second house. And so I think that starting from the beginning of June, and this is June 3rd, that we will start to feel like we're coming back up to speed. As I record this, Mercury is retrograde. There have been definite snafus I've seen not only with myself but others. But I don't know if it's been hellacious for anybody or just minor inconveniences here and there. And when Mercury goes direct, it still has to come back to the point where it was when it retrograded. And so it will still have a little ways to go. But at least there may be more feeling of momentum, forward movement. It's going to be in that second house. Now, that's a money house. And because it retrograded in the 3rd house, some of you may have been kind of going back and forth about whether or not you should just get some kind of training. Maybe you're not working for a while you're doing that because you want to throw everything you've got into your training and you don't want anything else to kind of distract you. And then it all comes back down to the money situation. So that might be if you have been kind of like trying to make a decision about something. Obviously, 100% of you will not go in one particular direction versus the other. It will have to do with whether or not you have enough money to begin with. Sometimes people, when they do something, they want to throw everything into it. They don't want to have to kind of divide their attention. So in any case, on the 3rd of the month, you may feel a little bit more one way or the other about a particular issue that may involve school or training versus just making money. The very next day, Saturn goes retrograde at 25 degrees of Aquarius, the 11th house. And that can be a time when some of your long-range goals are unraveling. That was the word that came into my mind. I don't know if that's really accurate, but certainly if you have been working to make certain things happen in terms of long-range goals, you may feel this sense of either you're going in the wrong direction, you need to do something before you can spend more time pursuing goals. that you have to get something else settled. And you may even just like kind of take the summer off perhaps and say, I just don't want to have to work on this right now. Some people have certain lifestyles that kind of are conducive to that. Like, for instance, teachers, they tend to take summers off. And if you're a teacher, you may have other goals besides teaching, I would hope. And that's where the Saturn retrograde comes in the 9th house, the 11th house, where you may be trying to have some of your hopes and wishes come true, but sometimes they may not be quite realistic. Saturn wants things to be in order, and it wants things to be realistic. Some people, and certainly Aries people, can be guilty as charged when it comes to this, have a lot of wild dreams, but they're not necessarily grounded. They're not necessarily something that could pass, I was going to say pass the smell test, but they could actually work if you were trying to implement them. And one of the main reasons why, and this is true, I would say, of Sagittarius as well, which I am a sun in Sag. I don't know about Leo. Leos are their own people, and they are good at, I think Leos actually, of all the fire signs, are the most practical, maybe because they have inner planets in Virgo a lot of the times. But my feeling is that Sag and Aries people tend to have very grandiose visions, but they are so optimistic about things that they kind of they don't take into account possible things that could deter them, and that can make things impractical or just unrealistic in some way. So so it's actually a good thing, because maybe if you slow down and you're able to reflect on it, you'll be able to make it happen. And I can't remember when Saturn goes direct, but Saturn will go direct later on this year, and then you can progress on whatever it is that you're trying to make it happen. And of course, Saturn in the 11th house, it's like slow and steady wins a race, and just being very methodical and things like that. On the 13th, Mercury goes back into Gemini, so it's back into that third house. Obviously, this is a general forecast, so that means that all the dates that I give are not necessarily going to dovetail with your personal charts, and but it's, it happens in the vicinity of the time that I tell you, so that's no biggie. Sooner or later, let's put it that way. And in the third house, you're very inquisitive. You want to learn things, but especially things that have a practical value, I would say, where you can apply. So that's why if you're getting training, it's different than if the opposite house, the 9th house, where you're going to the university, you're getting a degree in something. This may be getting a certificate or some kind of credentials that you need to be able to do what you're trying to do. Or you could even be teaching too, whether it's elementary school, tutoring, things like that. On the 14th, and another thing too to note is that we did have a new moon. I'm saying we had it, but actually it hasn't occurred yet as of my recording, so I'm just keeping it real. And on the 30th of May, that's when the new moon in Gemini is, or was, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And so the point is that because that happened when there was Mercury retrograde, the forward-moving seeds planted that we associate with the new moon couldn't really have that full chance to gel or shine because the Mercury retrograde was creating this force field of kind of backwards motion in, starting in that same sign, Gemini, that the new moon is in. And so I had said in somebody else's forecast, look to mid-June for the actual feeling of that new moon. So for you, this would be in that third house. And then that could be some kind of news about a teaching assignment or something like that. The very next day, we have a full moon at 23 degrees of Sag. This is the 14th of June. And for you, Aries, this is that 8th house. That's a very intense full moon because it is, I'm sorry, I said that 8th house, I mean 9th house. And this could be something that, of course, the full moons are intense in and of themselves. The fact that this is in Sag and the 9th house, it might make it a little bit less so. But I am always hesitant to say that because the Libra full moon that we had not too long ago, I felt was very intense, and I couldn't figure out why, because Libra is an air sign, and it reminded me of Scorpio for some reason, so I'm not quite sure what that was all about. But the point being that there could be some developments that connect with higher education, for instance. So, this is June, so maybe some of you are getting your college diplomas, and that the full moon can bring things to culmination. And because you're having this activity in the third house, the opposite house, some of you who have decided to become teachers, for instance, you might already be getting that assignment because maybe you did a student teaching somewhere and they decided to hire you there. This is the area of study that I had, was education. I'm curious what the current status is. I've heard that there is a great need for substitute teachers, but they have requirements where you have to have a teaching certificate sometimes, so it's a little bit difficult in that sense. So this can be also a situation where if you've been planning a trip far away, that everything starts to fall into place. Or if you've already been traveling abroad, you end your trip. On the 21st, the sun goes into Cancer, and that's a domestic area, 4th house of home and family. This is the solstice, and I always spell it S-O-U-L, solstice. In the northern hemisphere, we are dealing with the summer, the height of the summer, and what that represents. Very, lush time, very beautiful time, but the light starting to go. That's, I can't wrap my brain around that. That always gets to me because I love that summer solstice, but then it's like, okay, it's all downhill from here. It just, I wish it could be backwards. I wish the summer was the sun at its lowest point, but that's silly. It just seems like such a waste to have the sun go down, to lose the light when it's so nice out. So that's the height of the sun. And also, we're talking about the change of the seasons, which is the power of periods when the sun goes into cardinal signs. Of course, you're a cardinal sign, Aries, too, so you know of what I speak. The very next day, that Venus goes into Gemini in that third house. So this is a pretty big area, and you will be also getting hits to this house later on this year when Mars goes into, has its retrograde here. So I feel like there may be some Aries people who are, the word that came into my mind was ambivalent about third house matters. And I don't know why I said that. Maybe it was because with the Mars retrograde, it's something that you're not sure you should pour energy into to pursue. And how I feel about that is, let's say you have gotten a degree in education and you're trying to put it into use, but maybe something else has also grabbed your interest and you feel like you're not sure if you should do one versus the other. It might be a very push-pull type of situation. If I had to guess on what the conflict could be, it would probably be something where you have found spirituality and you feel this desire to pursue that. And I'm saying this because Chiron is in your sign. Neptune is in the 12th house. These are two examples of that. These transits that might be affecting you. And all of a sudden, the idea of something more mundane, like, mainstream education seems unappealing, even if you have spent several years getting a teaching certificate or what have you. So it's one of those kinds of things. Might not be exactly how I have characterized it, but kind of the more out of the box thing versus the traditional thing. Venus in that third house, though, can lend harmony to this area of life. You could be having good relationships with siblings. You could be making money from teaching, tutoring, writing, anything with online connections. On the 28th, there's a new moon at 7 degrees of Cancer. And this in that fourth house of home and family. Some of you may be, moving into a new home. With Venus in the third house, I do want to note as well that third house, I think it can be business. And so that might be something that is doing well. And actually, the fourth house can be real estate. So if you're selling real estate, then, as a profession, for instance, and maybe this is a new job, you might have some sale to celebrate right away. But of course, it could also be something that you're buying. And the third house could be a contract. Now that Mercury is direct, then everything else, you can see that Venus goes into Gemini as well. So you have both Venus and Mercury in Gemini in that third house. Very good for writing and online adventures. The same day that the new moon in Cancer is happening, on the 28th, Neptune goes retrograde at 25 degrees of Pisces. So that's what I was referring to about that 12th house with Neptune. That's its own house. It's Pisces house. And Neptune in the 12th, I feel, is very conducive to a person who is having really personal spiritual experiences or, explorations in that area. And depending on other factors, because of course Aries can have inner planets in Pisces as well, that can be a bit disorienting if you're not familiar with it. Some of the things that happen to you can feel otherworldly. And that's what I mean about perhaps making you feel like there's a push-pull between your more mundane life and your spiritual aspirations. But it can be, when Neptune goes retrograde, it's kind of more of a reality check. So it's like, don't get carried away, with all of these. Maybe you've had very vivid dreams and you're interpreting them in certain ways that needs to be more realistic. Maybe you have a tendency to over dramatize things, and there's just like, it's like kind of looking at things through a different lens when Neptune is retrograde. But I believe that it's extremely important that we have these periods of time to integrate, just on the basic level of integration of all the things that the transit has provided thus far. Okay, well, that's what I have for you, Aries. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, I have some specials going on for double readings. You can find out more information at the link below. Take care. Bye.